Hi everybody, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Lottie and today we are doing my January stats and wrap up. So hello everyone, how are you all doing? It is the beginning of February, which is insane. I can't believe we are a month into 2022 already. And so it's the start of a new month. That means we have to wrap up the previous month. So yes, today I am going to be talking you through the books that I read during January and also some statistics about those books and my reading habits for those of you who are stats nerds like me. So to get started, in the month of January I read a total of 8 books, which is absolutely fantastic. A great start to the year, and I've managed to get a jump start on my yearly annual goal. So those 8 books were equivalent to 3,085 pages, which I think is probably the most that I've read in a month in a long time. I'm very, very pleased with that number, and that actually equals to exactly 100 pages per day, which is great because that's my goal. I would like to read 100 pages a day on average every month. You know, that's not literally me sitting and reading just 100 pages every single day. There were some days I didn't read anything. There were some days that I read probably about 300 or 400 pages in one sitting. We'll get to that in a minute. And there were some days where I just listened to audiobooks. So I'm off to a great start in 2022. I'm really pleased. Obviously it's not a competition, it's not a, you know, you're not a proper reader unless you read this amount all the time, but I like to try and push myself to read a lot, and so I'm really pleased with that page count and that daily number. So for star ratings then, I had a very mixed bag in January, but overall it was a very good reading month. So in January I rated 1 book 2 stars, 1 book 3 stars, 4 books 4 stars, and 2 books 5 stars. And I think in January I found my new favourite book overall ever. So yeah. Of the 8 books that I read, 4 were fantasy novels, 3 were sci-fi, and 1 book was horror. 4 of the books that I read in January were physical books, whether paperback or hardback. 2 of those books were ebook. I listened to 1 audiobook, and I read 1 book through mixed media, so I both physically read it and I also listened to an audiobook. 6 of the books that I read in January were full-length novels. 1 was a novella, and 1 book that I read was a comic. And finally, for my age categories, 6 of the books that I read in January were published under the young adult category, and 2 of them were published as adults. So now that the stats are over, let's get on with the books that I read. So in January I took part in 2 readathons. The first was Be Sure-a-thon, hosted by the Wild Sasha, and also I participated in TBRPG-a-thon, which was hosted by Wandering Through Worlds. Be Sure-a-thon was a month-long readathon, so I fulfilled all the prompts over the whole month, and TBRPG-a-thon was a week-long readathon in the 3rd week of January, which I did fill all the prompts for, but in a very different way. More on that when I get to the books that I read during those readathons. I will mention which prompts the books were for each readathon, but I did complete both of them and I had a fantastic time participating in both of them. Both Sasha and Ro did a fantastic job with their readathons and hosting all the sprints and getting everybody involved. So yes, thank you to you both for such a fantastic January. I know in my January TBR as well, I did also mention the Spoopy Hole Patreon readathon. I'm not going to talk about the prompts or anything for that in any of my wrap-ups during the year, just because it is a Patreon thing, and possibly at the very end of the year I will just quickly overview which books were for which prompt, because the readathon will be over by then. And the same goes for Ro's Patreon Marvel readathon, which again, I am reading books to fulfill the prompts in that, but because it's a Patreon thing, if you want to find out what the prompts are for those readathons, then you should join both Spoopy Hole and Ro's Patreons. So the first book that I read in January was Knife Edge by Malorie Blackman, and I rated this 4 stars. I also used this for the POC author prompt in Readathon, which is a prompt from Team Mirror, which is Ro's team. Knife Edge by Malorie Blackman. This is the second book in the Noughts and Crosses series, which is a young adult dystopian series in a reversed world where instead of white Europeans colonising the rest of the world, black people instead colonise the rest of the world. And so black people in this world have all of the privilege and they are called the Crosses, and then white people are more oppressed and have less privilege and they are all called the Noughts. So this is a direct continuation of the first book. We are following Jude, who is Callum, one of the main characters from Noughts and Crosses' brother, and sort of the conflict that he has. This book is so shiny. The conflict that he has in this book as a result of what happened in the first book. And we are also still following Sephi, who was Callum's girlfriend. She is one of the main characters. She's the love interest. I don't really like talking about her in the context of just Callum, because she is very much her own character. She's a strong, independent woman, and we're also following her and how she deals with what happens at the end of Noughts and Crosses. I really enjoyed this book. It was a lot of fun. I loved seeing how both Jude and Sephi dealt with what happened. They are two very different people and they dealt with things in very different ways. Sephi, at the end of the day, is still very much a teenager, and some of the decisions she made in this book irritated me, but they made sense because she's so young and naive still. And some of the things that Jude did in this book as well were absolutely horrific. If you are looking for a book that represents a very evil character, then this is a fantastic book for that, whether it's for like a readathon prompt or something. Jude is stone cold. Like he's a horrible person, and it was really interesting to be in the head of a character who thinks that way. I absolutely love this. It was a brilliant follow-up. It was a very difficult book to read. I remember, I think it might be in an author note at the very beginning or at the end, where Malorie Blackman did say, like, where Noughts and Crosses was a book about love, this is very much a book about hate, and it is a very difficult book to read, and I think she said it was a difficult book to write, but it was an important book. And Jude's story needed to be told in order to continue with the series. So I'm very excited to get to see the third book in this series. And yeah, it was just great. So the next book that I read in January was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, which is the first book in her new adult fantasy series called Crescent City. And I devoured all 800 pages of this in a few days, and I think I read half of it in one sitting. This was absolutely brilliant. I gave it 5 stars. This is probably my new favourite book ever. At the time when I was reading it, I was like, I'm really loving this, but I don't know if it beats any of my other favourite books. But the more I have sat on this and the more time that has passed since I read this, I can finally say this is a favourite book. This had the emotional impact of a series finale, and this is only the first book, so I am so excited to read book 2, which comes out in February, and to see where this series is going to go. So yeah, this is an adult fantasy series following Bryce and Hunt. Bryce is a half fairy and Hunt is a fallen angel, and they are paired together to investigate a murder mystery. And this is essentially a murder mystery story set in an urban fantasy world, and it was brilliant. I'm not a mystery person. I don't tend to read mysteries or mystery thrillers that are in like a contemporary setting, but I really enjoyed the murder mystery aspect of this in the fantasy world. I loved seeing Bryce and Hunt's relationship develop and the chemistry and the banter between them. This is Sarah J. Maas's best written book to date. I absolutely loved it. It was just so good. It does start a bit slow, but I like that in Sarah J. Maas's books. I think I had the same feelings as with The Court of Silver Flames, where it was quite slow and then the action tends to all be at the end. This sort of had the same feeling where it did have a big build-up, and I can understand why people might not like that, because you know, it is slow, but I enjoyed seeing those slower moments between the characters and getting to know them, because otherwise the ending wouldn't have had as much of an emotional impact on me. You know, I love these characters, and I just love this book, and I'm so excited to see what happens to them next. It is it a chonker? It's 800 pages, but I definitely think it is worth it. It is not 800 pages of filler. Every page is important for those character moments, and to get you emotionally attached to those characters, and to just fall in love with them. And yeah, I absolutely love this book. So next I read Lore by Alexandra Bracken. I listened to this on audiobook and I did rate it 2 stars. I was reading this as a part of the Recreate book club, and I'm so sad that I didn't like it. Honestly, I don't know what it was about this book. Maybe it's because I was listening to it rather than reading it physically, but I just found it so difficult to follow. I couldn't get attached to the characters at all. I just didn't care, and I think I only powered through to see if it was getting better, but it didn't get better. I really wish that I had DNF'd this instead of wasting my time on it, but because I was listening to it, it's not like I was dedicating any time specifically to read it. I read most of it while I was traveling, and also on my lunch break at work, but I just didn't enjoy this book. So this is a modern sort of Greek myth retelling where the Greek gods are made mortal every 7 years for a week, I think, and it's basically a bit like the Hunger Games, where they all fight each other, and descendants of these human hunter families can kill the gods and then take on their powers to become the next iteration of that god. I liked the concept, I just didn't understand what the fuck was going on for most of this book. I just didn't get it. I just didn't know what was happening. I didn't know where the characters were. I didn't know who anybody was. I was like, who are all these people? What is going on? I just couldn't follow it. It could be down to me listening to it and not giving it my full 100% attention while I was reading it. But again, I don't think that is necessary because it was an audiobook. I've listened to audiobooks before while I've been doing other things and I've been able to follow them. So it was probably the book itself. I did like some of the characters and seeing some of the interactions between a few of the characters. There is a relationship between our main character Lore and a character called Cassandra. That's a little bit romantic, and every time there was a little bit of like flirting going on between them, I really enjoyed that. And there was also a conversation with Lore and Athena that I really appreciated, where they were talking about the representation of women in ancient times, especially in ancient Greece. And as someone who has studied women in ancient Greece as a part of my degree, I really appreciated that conversation in the book, because it made so many fantastic points about how women have been erased from history, and how women have just been constantly told you can't be this and you can't be that since the beginning of time. And I really appreciate that conversation. It was small moments like that brought the book back up for me and made me want to continue to see if it would get any more interesting, but overall I just didn't like it. So coming off the back of reading my favourite book and a book that I didn't like, I needed something that I knew I was going to enjoy. Otherwise I was like, I'm going to fall into a slump. So I decided to pick up volume 4 of Life is Strange, which is a comic series following the events at the end of the game Life is Strange. This is following Chloe and Max. Max has time travel powers and they have a relationship at the end of the game. It's sort of just following what happens to them at the end of the game. The game Life is Strange is choice-based, and so we are following the events after one particular choice and what happens as a result of making that choice. I love this comic. I love the art style. I mean, this cover is stunning, but also within... Let me try and find a good page. Where is a good page that isn't spoilery? I can't find one. So yeah, I love the art style in this. This isn't the most interesting spread, but it's really difficult to find anything that hasn't got spoilers in this. I loved the events of this one without giving too much away. This has a very interesting plot, and I've seen some people say that it felt a little bit fillery, and I can understand what they mean when they say that, but I enjoyed seeing some more of those intimate character moments in this, especially because comics are so short. You don't often get little character moments and character interactions, but I really enjoyed seeing that in this one. I did rate it 5 stars. This is one of my favourite book series. It's the only comic series I've ever read, but I absolutely love it. If you like light sci-fi, I think you would enjoy this, but I would really recommend watching a playthrough or playing the game before diving into this series, just because it has so many spoilers for the game and you kind of need to rely on the game to know about background characters. There is a character who appears in this who we haven't seen since the game. She hasn't appeared in the comics at all until this one, so if you hadn't played the game, you would be like, who the hell is this? I love this series. I'm so excited to read the next one, and I'm really sad that there's only 2 more to go until I finish this series because I love it so much. So the next book I read was Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. I used this for the Be Sure-a-thon prompt Vampire, and I also use this for all of my TBRPG-a-thon prompts. So just to quickly run you through those. The choices that I made were Duet, which is to read a book with multiple perspectives. Distract, which is to read a book, well, the prompt was just quiet. Left, which is to read a book in the left side of the world, so like North or South America. I rolled between 1 and 10, so the prompt was to read a book with less than 300 pages. I chose Long and Thin, which the prompt for that was Strong. I chose Harness. I don't know what I'm doing now. I chose Harness, which was the prompt for that was Falling. And finally, I chose To Steal, and the prompt for that was Betrayal. I did push some of those prompts a little bit in true Ro fashion. She always encourages everyone to stretch prompts. And I was feeling a bit like I am not going to complete this readathon because I haven't finished a book, and she said in one of the Patreon live shows, if you even read 1 page, you have won, and then she crowned me the winner of TBRPG-a-thon. So I can safely say that I completed TBRPG-a-thon. But anyway, so this book put me into a slump. I rated it 3 stars. I liked it. I just found it so difficult to get through. So in this book we are following Louis, who is a vampire, and also his maker Lestat. They originated in the 1700s in the South in North America. We're basically just following his life story. I would say that this is sort of like the blueprint for Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff. It's very much told in the same fashion. It's interview style, so Louis is telling this story to a person. Like the whole book is written in dialogue, so the events we see are him telling this story. I liked it. I liked what was happening, and I liked the story that Louis was telling. I just found it really difficult to follow. This is quite an old book. It was written in the 70s, so it could be just a result of the way books were written in the 70s. But also this book has no chapters, which I didn't like. It does have like little page breaks like this, but they weren't very frequent. So as someone who can only read in short snatches every now and then, it was really difficult to find a good stopping point, and when I went to pick it back up again I was a bit like, okay, what's going on? So I found it really difficult to follow, and because this book put me into such a slump and it took me so long to get through, I was a bit like, okay, do I want to continue on with this series? This is a 13 book series and it is a lot to invest. And I sort of looked at the synopsis of the next book, which does sound really interesting. I'm really interested to see what happens next, but I can't put myself through it again. I just can't. I was thinking, okay, because this is like 308 pages, which you can see how I stretched the book that is less than 300 pages prompt for this. I did stretch that a little bit, just a little bit. But I was like, okay, if book 2 and the rest of the books are like the same sort of length, I'll read it. The next book is like 500 pages. Bitch, I'm not going to fucking read that. I'm not putting myself through it again. So sadly, I am going to DNF this series at this point. I'm not saying I'll never pick up the next book. I just don't want to read it right now. I was reading this for Vampalong, but I just can't do it at this moment. I think I was so excited at the end of December about all these things that were going on in 2022. You know, in January I was doing 2 readathons, a book club, and 2 read-alongs, and I've put too much on my plate, and I want to read some more of my other books, and I don't want to dedicate like 2 weeks of my life every month to reading the books in this series at this point. So yeah, I am going to DNF this for now, but I liked this book. It was 3 stars. It was a good book. 3 stars is not bad. I just didn't like it enough to put myself through the stress of trying to finish it every month. It was good. It was good. So next I read City of Bones by Cassandra Clare, which I picked up as a part of By the Angel Along, that's what it's called. This is the first book in the Mortal Instruments, and it was my first time ever reading it, and I rated it 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. So this is the book that I like read and listened to at the same time. I really enjoyed consuming a book in that way. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this because it is such an old book in terms of YA books. This is like one of the very first YA series that ever came out, and like you know, the sort of in the same era as Twilight and Hunger Games and The Vampire Diaries, and you know, all of those teenage things where like they adapted everything, you know, like Divergent. Oh, let's not talk about Divergent. But anyway, yes, and I'd never read it. I really wish I had picked this up when I was a teenager because I would have loved it. I really enjoyed this. This follows Clare, who is just like your ordinary girl, but she's not like the other girls, you know, and she gets herself wrapped up in the world of the Shadowhunters, who are like demon slayers. They have their own like academy. What else? And it's just sort of a story of like a bit of like an urban fantasy where there's vampires and werewolves, and Clary is just, it's like event after event after event. There's definitely an overarching plot in here, I can tell, and I'm interested to see what's going to happen with that, but it was very simple. I rated it 4 stars. I did enjoy it in the end. I kind of had to see it in a different light to what I would with YA books that are written now. I definitely think the bar has been raised for young adult books, and I definitely think that YA that is written today is written much better than this was. But because this came out in 2007, you kind of have to see it as a book from 2007. You can't sort of put it on the same level. When I did that, I enjoyed it. It was so cheesy. There are so many cliche lines in here. Clary literally says, "I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding," groan, eye roll, etc., you know? So I liked it. It was a bit like, okay, this is very, very YA. This is like on the younger end of YA. And that's okay. This is a book for teenagers. And I feel like YA today is still for teenagers, but it's also trying to appeal to this adult audience that it has. So yeah, I really, really liked this. It was good. I'm excited to read the next one. As you can tell, I have bought the box set. This is the box set edition. The edition that I held up in my TBR video was a completely different one, so I'm definitely invested in this and I will definitely be continuing. I forgot to mention this I also used for the Be Sure-a-thon prompt, set in a world like our own. So the next book that I read in January was The Chosen Ones by James Breakwell, and I gave this 4 stars, and I also used it for the Be Sure-a-thon prompt, a sci-fi. So this was an arc that I had received from NetGalley that I completely forgot I needed to read in January when I made my TBR video, so this was on my actual like strict January TBR, and I'm glad I read it. It was so good. So this is a YA sci-fi about the end of the world and the end of humanity as we know it. So we are following 22 people on a moon station who are training to be the last people who go out and colonize the world. They are the end of humanity. There's only 22 people left, and they're sort of trained and taught by all these very sinister robots. The first thing to say about this book, it was so funny. It was absolutely hilarious. I'd never heard of James Breakwell before, but apparently he is a comedian. You could definitely tell he was good at comedy in this book. It was so funny. It was very tongue-in-cheek. I've seen it being compared to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I haven't had the pleasure of reading, but I can see sort of where that comes from, like that comparison. So it's something I wanted to read that anyway, but it's something I definitely want to read now when I can see how this book has been inspired by it. We are following these 22 people, and they are sort of like the worst possible people left in humanity to continue on the human race. At the very beginning, we sort of find out that although they are frozen as 12-year-olds, they are actually 62 years old. It's kind of like brushed over. It's kind of like, oh, you're 12, okay, but we're not. And the robots are a bit like, but you are. I don't know how to describe this book. It's just so good. It was really entertaining. It was really high stakes. The pacing was fantastic. It is like action from the get-go. A lot of what the characters do in this book is in this simulator where they sort of play out scenarios of how they can colonize this planet that they're supposed to go down to. And this planet it's been overrun with these megaroos, which are like 10 times killer kangaroos that the humans from several thousand years ago genetically made, put down on the planet for whatever reason, and then they sort of just spread and have taken over. So like if the R22 go down, they will be killed by these megaroos. And there's also dentapuses, which are 10-legged octopuses, which are also like come out of the water and try and kill them. So they're basically trying to work out the best scenario to go down to this planet and let the human race thrive. And it's so funny because they are all just sort of fighting against each other. It's called the Chosen 12 because only 12 of them can go down to the planet, and obviously there's 22, so they're sort of trying to prove to the robots who will select the Chosen 12 that they are the best candidate to go down. It sounds like I'm just rambling on about it because there's so much going on in this book, but it is really easy to follow. It was so funny, it was so entertaining. I would definitely read a fiction book from this author again. He has written non-fiction, but I'm not particularly interested in that. But if he ever wrote a sci-fi or something again, I would definitely pick it up. It was really good. It was so funny. You'd think with 22 characters plus some robots as well, it would be kind of difficult to get a gauge of like who's who and what's going on, but it was so easy to follow even with 22 plus characters. I loved the setting. I loved the whole simulation thing. It made me really want to play Civilization 6 again, and also a bit like SimCity. So it gave me the best vibes. I absolutely loved it. 4 stars, brilliant, such a good book. Definitely check it out. It came out on the 18th of January, so I would really recommend picking it up. Okay, and finally, the last book that I read in January was Where the Drowned Girls Go by Seanan McGuire, which is the 7th book in the Wayward Children series. It came out just this month in January, and I was eagerly awaiting it because I love this series. I sort of binged them all in 2021, and so I'm sad now that I'm going to have to wait another 12 months to read book 8. So in this book, we are following Cora, who first appears in book 3, I believe. And she, after something that happens in the series, she decides to go to this new school that is sort of like the opposite of Eleanor West's home. It's very strict. It's fucking scary. It kind of gave me the vibes of, if you've ever seen Fairly Odd Parents, where you've got like where the fairies come from with like Cosmo and Wanda, and sort of the vibe of that was very much like Eleanor West's home. And then you've got the Pixies, where it's all like grey and square and like you must fit into a box. And that was this new school. That was like the Pixies, and then Eleanor West was the fairies. It definitely gave me like those vibes. So I really enjoyed seeing this other school and how different it was, and I really liked the plot of this book. With this series, like every other book is sort of a continuation of a story, and then the other book is sort of like a backstory of when one of these children went into the world. So we still haven't seen Cora in her world, but I'm just, yeah, I really like Cora. She's a really great character. We meet quite a few new characters in this, and they are all sort of painted as bullies at the start, but then I feel like Seanan McGuire was trying to make them a bit more human and make you feel sorry for them, and I was a bit like, okay, but they haven't apologised or redeem themselves from when they were acting like bullies at the very beginning. And because these books are so short, it's really difficult to just turn things around that quickly. And that was one of the main issues that I had with it. So I think I said I gave this 4 stars. If I didn't, I gave it 4 stars. I'm really, really excited to see what happens next in this like overarching plot that we're getting. It was also really refreshing to not have another book focused on Jack and Jill, who are great characters, but I feel like there has been so much focus on them and I don't like them that much. So it was really refreshing to get a story that wasn't just focusing on them. But yeah, I'm interested to see what the next book will be about, because it will probably be a story of a portal world. I have an inkling it might be the portal world story of one of the characters we met in this book, but you never know. I also really liked seeing the appearance of a character we met in book 6, who a lot of people haven't really liked Across the Greengrass Fields, because it was about a character we'd never met before. It felt a little bit random to a lot of people, but it was nice to see who she was having read that book. I would definitely recommend reading Across the Greengrass Fields before you read this one, because I don't think you would have as much connection with this character if you haven't seen her story first, even though it felt a little bit random at the time when Across the Greengrass Fields came out. But yeah, I really liked this, and I can't wait to read the next one. And I also used this for the Portal Fantasy prompt in Be Sure-a-thon, of course, because it is a Portal Fantasy. So, of course, my favourite book of the month was House of Earth and Blood. New favourite book of all time, probably. I absolutely love this. Can't wait to see what the next one brings us. Yeah, it was just fantastic. Just 5 stars, 10 out of 10. Chef's kiss, beautiful. My most disappointing book was Interview with the Vampire. I had such high expectations going into this. I really thought I was going to love it. It is like the classic vampire story, you know, it is the thing that brought vampires into popular fiction. And I was just so disappointed that I didn't like it as much as I wanted to, and that it did put me into a reading slump. So yeah, I'm so sorry, Ms. Anne Rice. It just wasn't for me. And finally, my most surprising book of the month was City of Bones. I thought I was going to like this, but I wasn't sure because I knew it was such an old young adult book, and I was thinking, you know, I probably won't like the writing style or it'll feel dated to me, but it surprised me pleasantly, and I really enjoyed it. So these are the books that I read in January, obviously minus my digital books, because I can't physically hold something that doesn't have a physical form. But yeah, it was a pretty good reading month for me, and I really hope that I can keep it up, you know, start as you mean to go on. Okay, so that is it from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching and sticking through me through my wrap-ups. I love doing wrap-ups. I love talking about my stats and giving little reviews of all the books that I've read. I think that wrap-ups are like the best way to get a sense of whether or not you should read a book, because I've actually read them. I can recommend them or not. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and let me know in the comments down below what you read in January, and if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. If you haven't already and you would like to be, please subscribe to my channel. It would mean so much to me. And if you would like to leave a comment but you don't really have anything to say, leave the little crescent moon emoji for Crescent City in the comments down below to let me know that you got this far. Thank you once again for watching, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!